LSU just made a change at their athletic director position. Now UCLA should do the same.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. What we got on target today, UCLA men's basketball has listened to the cries and will actually be in the Thanksgiving tournament. We'll talk about that in their 2026 campaign. Next, we'll talk about in the second segment, is UCLA going to get 30 wins this year? We'll talk about Mick Cronin's bunch for this year's team, but we have to start with what needs to happen, the change with UCLA at the athletic director position. But after we tell you that this episode is brought to you by Mazda, like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda Move and Be Moved. To move UCLA forward as an athletic program, you can see that there's been constant problems with UCLA, small, and now becoming more and more apparent with the lack of UCLA success at the football program. And then little mini issues where you're like, man, why is there donor data being leaked? Why is there all of a sudden a suing by the city of Pasadena from UCLA looking at potentially leaving the Rose Bowl? All right. Now, it's one thing to look, it's another thing to do, and it's another thing to be sued. And that's all because you have Martin Jarmond at the helm of UCLA. Everybody's going to point to where's the success for all these coaches that have been hired by Martin? Are there good relationships between these coaches and Martin Jarmond? And now, why are there tarps on the Rose Bowl? Why is there everything, including, I think, what Ben Bolch described, the LA Times beat writer, as a weird, awkward encounter for Martin taking the credit and what was supposed to be a off-the-record conversation for UCLA's then superior turnaround after an 0-4 start, switching from Deshaun Foster to skipper and then Jerry Neuheisel being hired as offensive coordinator. All sorts of weird things that have been going on, and quite frankly, it seems like everybody's had enough. You don't just see fire your AD banners being flown around the stadium. That was the craziest thing I've seen until out of nowhere, earlier this week, you had LSU firing their head coach. All right, they got rid of Brian Kelly. Huge payout, everything that's pretty crazy. But then you had Louisiana's governor come out and say their own AD, Scott Woodward, an LSU alum, is not going to hire the next football coach. Their own governor. We don't talk politics, but when a politician is going out there saying their own AD is not going to hire the head coach, crazy. All right? And you're like, imagine if UCLA just amplified the pressure, the fan base, everybody, a little more, and then some, because then in the blink of an eye, in like 24 hours out of nowhere, Scott Woodward is out of a job. All right? And he is capable. He hired Kim Mulkey. He brought Kim Mulkey, a top-tier championship coach, to LSU. He convinced Brian Kelly to leave Notre Dame and go to LSU, all right? Brought in a baseball coach that's won a couple of national championships and kept their championship tradition alive over there, all right? Now, this isn't Locked On LSU. We don't care about that nonsense. But in my mind, I'm thinking, this dude's out of the job. We're all fed up with Martin. I know it's a big challenge. It's a big life change to go from SEC country to UCLA and now Big Ten country. But, hey, if you want to go make a big move, if UCLA was like, hey, if we wanted to give a few years to changing the trajectory of UCLA football, a guy who knows football through and through, who's targeted the biggest guys in the sport in Jimbo Fisher when he was at Texas A&M. That's Scott Woodward. Bringing Brian Kelly from Notre Dame to LSU, which was one of the bigger changes in coaching out of nowhere. And you're like, okay, interesting. You could argue about those hires and the amount of money that's cost people, but I'll divulge a little more in a moment. If you want to make a switch and make a big splashy switch at the AD position, before you even hire a head coach, that would be an intriguing hire. All right? That would be something to look at. And if you're like, Zach, you're dumb, we're not even going to touch that. Why would some guy who's an LSU alum, an SEC guy through and through, just change course and come to UCLA? And why follow his track record of hiring Brian Kelly? Now gets a big payout. And you look at Jimbo Fisher. got a big payout because he got fired. Well, Scott Woodward actually left Texas A&M for LSU prior to Fisher getting that contract extension. That is now the record contract buyout. All right. He didn't give that extension that led to the buyout for Fisher. He did hire him, but he didn't give that extension. He was already at LSU. When it comes to bringing Brian Kelly over from Notre Dame to LSU, that's a huge switch. Imagine you had a guy who could convince and get the support of the administration top to bottom to make something like that happen. Haven't seen that at UCLA. You look at Martin's tenure. He had a guy that was not his own in Chip Kelly. And then out of nowhere, when it's like, oh, this is really failing. Because before people had soured on Martin, everybody has soured on Chip. It's completely. Fire him, fire him. This tenure for Martin, whether it's a mistake here, mistake there, would look completely different if UCLA and Martin Jarmond and the UCLA athletic department was able to find a way to get rid of Chip Kelly. Or not just turn around and go from Chip into what is now a debacle with going with Deshaun Foster to now a new head coaching search, where the leading odds makers have put out the likes of either Jed Fish. I've seen other ones put out of the likes of Jed Fish, Jonathan Smith, and Tony White, which we've all talked about on this show. The likelihood, the excitement of the fan base, that's one thing. But nothing has been exciting the fan base more than UCLA wanting to get rid of Martin Jarmond, to which I even seen John Wilner tweet out, post on X. Man, UCLA is acting like an SEC fan base. Yeah, because there is actual tradition at this school watching and believing and cheering for football and more sports. It's champions made here. It's a slogan. A true men's basketball national championship powerhouse for years prior to the last 30 years. They have tradition at UCLA. There is. And there is football tradition. Now, if you can go turn things around and be like, wait, maybe go get Scott Woodward. Or you're like, that's not even possible. There's no way he would even consider it, even for a few years. And you're like, well, if a guy that's had a few hires has led to more national championships in different sports than what Martin's been able to change here at UCLA in his short time since about 2020, you're like, And there's more and more mistakes being made or made publicized in weird interactions with the media coming out. And they own 64 players from UCLA's former football players put out by Ben Bullock to the LA Times saying, yeah, there's a letter that went to Julio Frank that said, yeah, get rid of this guy. It's trending in the wrong direction. So whether it's a Scott Woodward or not, it seems like action has to be made. Because it seems like where Louisiana's governor came out and said, this dude's not making another hire, whether he believed he was, in Scott Woodward's case, the reason that Texas A&M had to spend $1 bazillion to get rid of Jimbo, and now LSU $1 bazillion to get rid of Brian Kelly. Obviously, that's a made-up number, but just, anything to spend a lot to get rid of a guy. How can more mistakes, building and building, leading to this situation where UCLA is almost hiding the fact that they don't necessarily want Martin to make this decision. Having a coaching search committee with a guy that's a UC regent that's had to go petition to the UC regents and Bob Myers and say, hey, we need more money to support the program. And in turn, this is going to help the public UC system even more so than you thought it would hurt with UCLA moving to the Big Ten. More work is being done than it seems like Martin himself, unfortunately, at this case. Maybe it's not Scott Woodward. Maybe it's not the case. But it's trending in the wrong direction where if all the way across the country in SEC country, obviously a little different than what UCLA has to deal with, if LSU's guy can step down and change things in the course from one statement, how is the pressure not building more like a pressure cooker, just building and building with more mistakes, more egregious mistakes than hiring Brian Kelly or Jimbo Fisher? UCLA obviously swung big for Chip, and that wasn't Jarmond's decision. But when he had a chance to make a big splash, cut ties with Chip, and then go get a big-name coach or bring in somebody who is young and up and coming, it pivoted to Deshaun Foster, who it seems like apparently from a few conversations with anybody, probably wasn't the most equipped to become a head coach of a Power 4 conference heading into the Big Ten. Did a lot of the recruiting. There's been some good things. I've touched on a lot of negative for Martin, but I mean, go get a big guy. Go get a big fish as an AD. Go get a big fish as a head football coach rather than settling. And this is where it's a huge decision for Julio Frank, who's playing the PR game, the UCLA chancellor, Having to deal with Martin's contract being extended and almost guaranteed if you get rid of him in before 2029? Like, how is that not shady? All these things to keep him extended before Julio Frank was brought in as the official chancellor, but when he was already announced as the guy waiting. There's a lot of weird things going on with UCLA, which is why they keep shooting themselves in the foot when they're just like, oh, if we just petition the UC Regents, we'd be good. But now they're getting sued by Pasadena. Now there's another contract to deal with. Oh, by the way, there's nobody going to the Rose Bowl. When we can fix those things, but there's now 5 more issues in the way of just simply, hey, how do we bring excitement back into the football program versus now we have to deal with the Rose Bowl not liking us in the city of Pasadena. Let's not leak all the data. Let's get weird with the media. It's just stacking up. And we're kind of fed up. I'm kind of fed up. Go get a Scott Woodward or somebody, or prove to Martin that, hey, these mistakes will not be accepted going forward, which is maybe what Julio Frank's trying to say. He has their support. But now that he's got an official foothold as the chancellor, he probably gets a chance to make those decisions. We'll find out. Next, let's see if UCLA can be a 30-win team. Who thinks so? Well, I'll tell you next on Locked On UCLA. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about the game, but it's about playing the game. It's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this week's Move the Game Forward moment is brought to you by Mazda. We're talking to you about the Scooter Jackson, Keanu Williams combo, right? Keanu Williams had the tip, and Scooter Jackson had the pick of Fernando Mendoza, who in the few bright spots of that game against UCLA versus Indiana, well, man, that was a huge, huge play that kept the Bruins in it, getting a big-time pick against a contender for all the National Player of the Year awards. And those two had a great moment defensively that should go on the highlight tape. Big time. And whatever moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Now we pivot to the hardwood. It's because UCLA, from ESPN, they are apparently a team that can be a 30-win team in this upcoming year. All right, Myron Metcalf listed his potential teams that can get to 30 wins. All right, and generally a 30-win team means either you're an elite mid-major or you're a championship caliber team from a P5 conference. All right, and that is what UCLA is on the verge of doing. Dark horse Final Four teams in every list of top 3 contender in the Big Ten. This is a team that UCLA is going to have a lot of eyes on. And the thing about UCLA, you can get stuck in a crowded field in the Big Ten, forgotten about in now an SEC that cares a lot about basketball. And Big 12 is going to have a lot of top-heavy talent. ACC has been struggling to get their Big East is getting a lot of love. The way you can keep your tradition going, you can get the championship banner lifted after 31 years in 2026 with Mick Cronin and Donovan Dent. You dominate on the West Coast. You get that West Region 1 or 2 seed. You're playing in San Jose. You're playing the first round in San Diego, and you get yourself back to a Final Four. All right. So here's what UCLA is contending with this year. All right. So the idea is there's a lot of hype because UCLA went out and beat San Diego State and dominated a UC Irvine team that's expected to be a Big West contender. All right. So on this list of 30-win teams, you have 2 Big Ten teams other than UCLA, Michigan and Purdue. All right. That talks about the battle of this Big Ten season. And you have Gonzaga, who is expected to rack up wins in the WCC. And then UCLA, and alongside another UC school, UCSB. So if UC Irvine is supposed to win the Big West, and they have another team like UCSB that has Aiden Mahaney in the Big West, and they're like, all right, that's how good Irvine's supposed to be. They're supposed to be a Gaucho team that's pretty good in the Big West. UCLA just drubbed them by 30 to 40 points in an exhibition, all right? That's how good the Bruins are, that they're beating a UC Irvine team that can be a Cinderella story to a Sweet 16 in March, potentially, in ease, with relative ease. But then I was like, but is UCLA actually going to be on the short list of 30-win contenders of the last few championship teams over the last decade. I think Myron Metcalf put on like a lot of them, if you exclude those COVID seasons, are pushing 30 by the end of the regular season. And then by the time the tournament gets done, they've already got that 30 wins. So I was looking like, all right, what does UCLA have to deal with when it comes to contending? All right. Well, UCLA has a very manageable home non-conference slate. Their toughest home non-conference game is Arizona State. And I think I was seeing Michelle Gardner, someone who keeps tabs and covers Arizona State athletics, that Arizona State's extremely injured. They got a couple of guys down, maybe 3. Now that might change come late December, but it seems like Arizona State gets there in their own way, and the Bruins should win every game at home in the non-conference schedule. Then some of the key matchups are Gonzaga. You have Arizona in early November, mid-November. You have Cal, and those are some of the big games for UCLA that are road neutral site games. You should beat Cal. If UCLA can pick off Gonzaga or Arizona early, you're looking at a non-conference slate of what, 11-0, 10-1? And you're like, okay, look at this schedule, something like that, right? A Big Ten schedule where UCLA hosts Purdue, hosts in Illinois, hosts Indiana. They don't have to go to the East Coast. UCLA said, we're not playing in that game in Madison Square Garden. We're not playing in the CBS Sports Classic. No Thanksgiving tournaments. No random East Coast trips where you go there 3 times in 3 weeks. That's Mick Cronin quoting everything that he can think of in his brain. The toughest stretch for UCLA will come when they go to Michigan on a Saturday and play Michigan State on a Tuesday. Huge games for the schedule. A sneaky Minnesota trip sandwiched around Nebraska and USC. But last year, the Bruins were really good when it came to winning the West Coast games. I don't think UCLA is going to sweep the West Coast games this year. I think they might get knocked off a couple of times on the road. I think UCLA will be very good. I think they can challenge for a Big Ten crown. I think they will have a top seed in the West region. I just think it's tough to get 30 wins. Now, I think this team is really good. I think they might just fall short of 30 wins outside of a national championship run. Because if you think about it, that means they're like 35-5, 34-5. If they're 30 wins by the end of the regular season, number 1 team in the country. And if the other teams that you're expecting to get 30 wins are 2 teams in your conference and a team you're playing in the non-conference, UCLA could stack a lot of wins. I think they'll be very consistent. They should be a lot higher than a 7 seed. I just think it'll be tough sledding because you have to go to the Michigan schools. USC, I think, will beat UCLA once. Maybe Oregon might do the same, or Washington. One of those West Coast schools might give UCLA an unexpected loss. The Bruins might be 4-2 in those West Coast games. They were 6-0 a year ago. It's very different. Some of those miracle heaves at the buzzer or last-second comebacks that went UCLA's way last year in those West Coast games, I'm not sure they will this year. But I do believe Mick Cronin and UCLA will be better on the road against non-West Coast teams in the Big Ten this year. Maybe not to the tune of 30 wins early in the schedule, but I do think the Bruins can get there because they'll go on a deep run in the tournament. I don't think it'll be like, 2 games in the Big Ten tournament and 1 game in the tournament, there'll be 30 wins already. I think UCLA has to go on a big run to earn up to 30 wins this year. Because I think the schedule by the time Big Ten plays, a little daunting. And I still think they are a 3rd weekend type team. It's just a matter of, can they actually take care of business in the non-conference? Will they stay healthy? They're already dealing with Eric Daly Jr.'s kind of knee strain, out for the opener, but hopefully will be back by game 2 or 3. And then the lack of production in the post is what gives me concern to say they're good. I think they can go on a tournament run when they stop playing Big Ten teams and they have a good offensive flow. I just think they might struggle a little bit in the middle portion of the season to get there, and Mick Cronin will take those lessons and apply them into March and eventually into April. So I don't think there'll be 30 wins at the end of the regular season. I think they'll need a big run in the tournament just to reach 30. But I could be wrong, and that just shows you the type of love the Bruins are getting after the exhibition season, after John Rothstein has them top 7 in his preseason 10. It's just how many lumps do the Bruins have to take en route to that? Are they a Big Ten champion? Well, then you're the number 1 seed, 100%. on one of the top 4 seeds. If not, then just settle for a West region in the first couple of rounds. What we'll talk about next is UCLA finally expanding the Thanksgiving/Christmas schedule with an actual mini tournament. What? We'll talk about it next on Locked On UCLA. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. For UCLA, we're talking about Anthony Frias because he delivered in a big way. Back-to-back weeks where he's been UCLA's leading rusher against both Maryland and against Indiana. Frias has come through. And if you've been watching week after week in a running back room that's delivered different rushers, Frias being back-to-back leading rushers, wow, big-time stop. And you know that performance wasn't a fluke. And just like Frias delivered for UCLA, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You can save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, and the promo period is available through November 18th. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Every time you miss the start of a game, you're like, man, what can I do? Well, ride the hot hand, or with FanDuel, there's live bets on everything from who will score next to the fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine all those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It's the way to keep the game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, now we're talking about UCLA's update to the schedule in 2026. And what do I mean by update? Well, there's been one thing I've been asking for. UCLA needs to up the ante in terms of non-conference scheduling, right? I've been a little disappointed. I want big-time matchups. UCLA has been shying away from traveling a lot in the non-conference because in old school days, which is not that far away, the Bruins in the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 or the Pac-8 would travel a lot less in the conference season to varying degrees from the mid to late 90s, even though UCLA would have big trips sometimes with smaller conference schedules. UCLA would be playing Arizona. They'd be going to play a Washington. They'd go to Oregon, USC, and then later Utah and Colorado. Very short, easy, manageable trips largely, other than maybe Pullman. UCLA can get to those places with relative ease, and they've done that many times. Then you mix in a conference schedule that last year had UCLA going to Rutgers, going to Maryland, 2 days in between trips. So you not only have to stay longer, travel more, they're missing more times in the classroom and everything, right? So that led to a lot of updates with the scheduling for Mick Cronin. They have to have a minimum home game mandate. They got to get a lot of wins in those stretches. And then it's like, well, why are we playing in New York in our CBS Sports Classic and going to Atlanta and then going to New York only for Vegas to be an option every third or fourth year in that rotation? Now you mix in more travel, a conference tournament that's going to be Indianapolis, Chicago, and take a couple of years before it even gets to Vegas. The Bruins have eliminated any part of traveling in the non-conference schedule. Other than flying up to the Pacific Northwest, we're just not going to see it. We're not. So what UCLA now, according to John Rothstein on October 29th, has said that they will be a headliner in the, if I'm saying this right, Rady Children's Invitational in San Diego. Basically what that is a small 4-team pod in a Thanksgiving tournament with UCLA, Texas, Georgetown, and St. Mary's. All right. So a 4-team pod locally. Remember, UCLA used to play in the Wooden Classic. They would play, or Wooden Legacy, and that would be in Anaheim, sometimes in Orange County. We've seen an Acrisure Invitational grow out into Palm Desert. And I was thinking about, wait a minute, UCLA should get one of those. Well, of course, John Rothstein reported fairly recently that they're going to be in one in San Diego. There's already one this year it's in 2025. Used to be hosted at UC San Diego. It is hosted at the University of San Diego at their Jenny Craig Pavilion, where obviously it'll be interesting to go to now Steve Lavin's new and current home at the home of the Toreros. So the Bruins will take on either Texas, Georgetown, or St. Mary's. So we'll see how that looks. Obviously, depending on how they mix the matchups up, do you want UCLA to play St. Mary's and get in the championship game? Do you want to play Georgetown, get a Big East school in there? Obviously, I think they might avoid UCLA and Texas, depending on how things look next year. And hopefully it's UCLA coming off a national championship run. But there are ways for UCLA to be in those Thanksgiving tournaments, whether it is a Vegas, whether it is a San Diego. We've seen some played at what I believe J. Sarah High School or somewhere in the Southern California, Orange County coast, where you're like, there have been these expanding tournaments where these East Coast teams want to come to good weather and play in Southern California, go to Hawaii, go to Vegas, where it seems to be the home of holiday tournaments and conference tournaments on the West Coast. Again and again and again. So UCLA, all of a sudden, according to John Rothstein, has given that news. That's what UCLA is looking into. Ways to play high-profile games, neutral site, West Coast, get multiple of them, instead of this year where they're playing Sac State, Presbyterian, and Cal in San Francisco. If you're playing Cal and it's anywhere other than in the tournament, Pauley Pavilion, or in Berkeley, I'm a little frustrated. And I've voiced those frustrations, whether we've had KJ on the pod, I've been on the podcast, and now they're finally going to start getting some SEC, Big East, a good West Coast school in St. Mary's, who has flirted, I think, at times with maybe joining Gonzaga with the Pac-12. At the moment, it looks like they'll be headlining more, right, with this UCLA run in this 2026 Rady Children's Invitational in San Diego. All right. So I wonder if there's ways for UCLA to start rotating between the Players Era Festival, like Oregon's gotten into. So you go into Vegas, you go into San Diego, find your way into that 4-team tournament in Acrisure Invitational. I was reading, I think, what John Rothstein put. That tournament is expanding from just Thanksgiving to even just before Christmas. So there's ways for UCLA to get marquee pre-Christmas games in between Big Ten games as well, even if they want to avoid some of those big name games because of finals. Well, there's ways to still get big games pre-Christmas, during Thanksgiving, with local close tournaments where big name schools have been playing. If they don't want Arizona to headline the one in Palm Desert every year in Coachella Valley, then that's where UCLA mixes in. And they can bounce between those tournaments, because I doubt UCLA might go to the Maui in quite some time. Obviously, they had those few years in between. I think Mick Cronin will turn it down for as long as possible. Now it looks like they're starting to be innovative and utilize, hey, there's a West Coast tournament in our backyard. Let's go to San Diego. Good weather. You drive 2 hours. Well, UCLA might take 3 hours from Westwood to San Diego. You get down there and you play those big games. That's the way to do it. I hope this is something that's a good trend, actually mixed with home and home games in the non-conference schedule. But until then, I'll just be yapping for no reason. Speaking of no reason to be yapping, I don't want to hear anything until we hear UCLA getting the dub against Nebraska, right? Well, we'll talk about that all this next week, because the bye week is done, basically. So stay safe, stay spooky, have a happy Halloween, and we'll talk more UCLA football, basketball throughout the weekend, throughout the week, in terms of the coaching change, whether there's any updates in the athletic director spot. UCLA basketball starts on Monday. We'll talk about it. We'll react to all the games. And so does UCLA women's basketball. We'll talk about it all here on this podcast. So like, comment, subscribe, download your home for the UCLA football and basketball teams, and we'll bring in more stuff as well. I'm Zach, getting ready to sign off. So hands up, Bruins fans, 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.